I made my stepson pay back the loan he told his grandmother was a gift, straight out of his own summer job paycheck. So my stepson Marcus is 17. I've been in his life since he was 9, so we've had our moments over the years, but honestly things had been pretty good between us lately. He's a decent kid mostly. That's what made this whole thing so frustrating, I think. It wasn't like it came from nowhere. Back in April, my wife's mom, Grandma Dolores, she's 74, lives about 40 minutes away, called my wife crying. She said Marcus had come to visit her a few weeks earlier, which we knew about. What we didn't know is that he told her he needed money for a school trip to Washington, D.C. Said it was $340, which sure, that's roughly what a school trip costs. Told her he was embarrassed to ask us because we'd already spent so much on his new phone and he didn't want to seem ungrateful. Really laid it on. Dolores gave him the money from her grocery fund and made him promise not to tell us because she didn't want us to feel bad. There was no school trip. I found out the night my wife got that call. She came into the living room looking pale and said, "I need you to hear this and stay calm." That's never a good opener. She played me the voicemail Dolores had left. Dolores had run into another parent from Marcus's school at her pharmacy, mentioned how excited Marcus must be about DC, and the woman had no idea what she was talking about. My wife went up to talk to Marcus. I waited downstairs. I could hear the low murmur of it through the ceiling. When she came back down, she looked exhausted. She said he'd admitted it, said he was sorry, said he'd been wanting money for a gaming setup and thought it was the easiest way to get it without us saying no. He'd figured Dolores would never mention it to us. She almost didn't. We sat at the kitchen table, all three of us, and I let my wife do most of the talking because it was her mother. Marcus mostly looked at the table. At one point he tried the "I was going to pay her back eventually" angle, and my wife just said, "From what? You didn't have a job in April." Which was true. He did now though. He'd started working at a landscaping company at the beginning of June. Cash job, 3 days a week, something like $180 or $200 a week, depending on hours. Here's where we landed. Marcus was going to pay Dolores back the full $340. Not a check from us that he'd theoretically repay later. His money, his paycheck, whatever he'd already saved. Not just that he was sorry things got complicated or whatever soft version he'd been rehearsing in his head. He had to say it plainly. He lied to her to get money. There was no trip, and here was the $340 back. He pushed back on the call. Said it would be humiliating. I said, yeah, that's part of it. My wife asked him to think about what Dolores had actually done. This is a woman on a fixed income who gave him money out of her grocery budget because she believed him and didn't want him to be embarrassed. The embarrassment was supposed to be on her, not him. And then she'd spend however many weeks not mentioning it to protect his feelings, until she accidentally found out she'd been played. Marcus was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Is she really mad at me?" My wife said, "She kept saying she thought he trusted her." He made the call that night. I don't know everything that was said because we gave him privacy, but it was long. Like 40 minutes. When he came downstairs, his eyes were red. He didn't say anything, just went to the kitchen, made himself a sandwich, and went back to his room. He handed me an envelope 2 days later. Asked me to get it to Dolores. $340 in cash. 3 weeks of saved up pay and part of his 4th check. I told him he should take it himself. He said he wasn't ready to see her face. I took him anyway. She hugged him at the door for a long time. He stood there with his arms kind of stiff and then eventually hugged her back. She made him sit down and eat something and mostly talked about her garden and her neighbor's dog and didn't bring up the money at all after she'd taken the envelope and quietly set it on her counter. In the car on the way home, he didn't say much. Right before we pulled into our driveway, he said, "I didn't think she'd still want to see me." I said, "She's your grandmother. That doesn't just go away because you screwed up." He nodded and got out of the car. He's been mowing her lawn for free every 2 weeks since then. She didn't ask him to.